Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. And today I have the honor to be interviewing Mr. Louis Lessure on January 31st, 2008 at the Public Library. And Mr. Lessure, it's a privilege to be talking with you today. We can start the interview today with telling us a little bit about how you came to join the service.
Well, I was the first one to enlist in my class, and I wanted to enlist rather than be drafted. Therefore, I could select what I wanted to do, and my intentions were to get into the U.S. Marines, Air Force, and because of my height, I was too short for them, and after a few months of going back and forth between Columbus and Grosse Ile, Michigan, where I was being checked, where they had to have an occlusion of my bite to make sure I could breathe properly when in the plane. I got to the point where my draft number was beginning to come up, so I went back to Cincinnati from Columbus and joined the Army Air Force, only to find when I returned home, I was accepted in the Marines. I therefore was in the Air Force, enlisted as a pilot. I began my training, and after a while, all the delays went on for months, and I went into pilot training and was washed out in my primary.
Real quick, when did you enlist? What was it, 42?
I enlisted, it was 42, January 42.
Okay.
And I wound up first in Montgomery, Alabama, and so forth. But after not making it in as a pilot, out of 5 men being tested, 3 of us were washed out, only because the instructor was one who was a civilian, never came in until too late in the morning to train us. Therefore, we ran out of time and we had to be washed out, which came to my benefit because I was reclassified in Tennessee to be a bombardier.
So they washed you out. Just want to get a kind of an idea of what happened here. Did you actually, were you tested? Did they come in and test each group to see if you could move on to the next level?
No, we flew.
Okay.
And then you would be graded on your flying.
Okay, I gotcha.
Then you go from primary to secondary and then on. But I was reclassified as a bombardier.
Okay.
And I began my bombardier training in Victorville, California. And I received my wings there and was then sent to Shreveport, Louisiana to be reclassified as a bombardier in these. We were making up, we were not in Shreveport, we went to Florida, to Tampa, and we began the 394th Bomb Group. Well, I was in that group and made up with a team and worked with them until they were to go overseas out of Michigan.
So at this point, you had all of your, you obviously had been through basic training in the Army, and you had been trained as a bombardier, and now you were forming your bomb group and just getting to know each other kind of thing?
Well, we were made as a team, and we flew. We had our crew, and we trained with the bomb group, and we would have targets around the country that have different schools. For one thing, we operated out of Michigan, and Battle Creek, Michigan, and then we went down into, we'd work our training in conjunction with the ground forces in Tennessee and maneuvers. We would come in and target, drop, and we'd take pictures of what we were simulating bombing.
Okay.
And finally, after having a little trouble with the adjutant, I was reclassified rather than go overseas, which my team that I was with were shot down on the first mission. So I had my life saved, of course, and I was sent down to Shreveport to be reclassified, reappointed,
Okay.
and then we made up another team, and we went overseas and joined the 17th Bomb Group in Africa.
So the original team that you were with got shot down on its first mission. What you had been spared.
Out of London.
Do you know that if any of the guys survived out of that mission, or did
No,
none of them survived?
No.
Oh wow. Okay.
No, their casualties were heavy. And so I began with the 17th in Africa.
How did you get overseas? Did you fly or did you?
We flew over.
Okay.
Yeah, we were transported over. And from Casablanca, we went to Nigeria, and then from Nigeria we went up into. I didn't do very much work in Africa itself. It was pretty well over for our group, and we were being pushed up into Sardinia, and we flew out of Sardinia and were bombing targets in the southern France and Austria.
At this point, what was this still 1943 when you first got overseas?
Was what?
1943 when you
Yeah.
Okay. Were you supporting the invasion of Italy?
Yeah,
and
we were in on
Sicily?
that. Yeah.
Okay.
We were there before that,
Okay.
and then we were bombing targets before that. And then we moved over into Corsica, and from Corsica, where I was being reclassified again, because I didn't come over I didn't bomb with the group I was to be with, because another bombardier ahead of me had fright from service and wouldn't fly, and had to be shipped back to the States. So I joined up with a lead bombardier, a lead pilot, and became his bombardier. So it wasn't the same crew that I went overseas with.
Okay.
And we flew quite a few missions. I think I had 35 missions. And we were graded pretty much on how we bombed. Photographs were taken of what targets and how we hit them and so forth. And I had 600% missions.
Wow.
That meant that all the bombs in my flight, all their bombs had to hit within 100 feet. So I had a pretty good record.
Sure. Yeah.
And I still keep in touch with the pilot that I flew with. And he's living in Oklahoma. I've been out there to see him. But he has records of all the bombing missions. But our targets were in the Po Valley.
Okay.
We operated, but our targets were rail yards, ammunition dumps, bridges, boats, and anything that was in supply. And no home and no towns. It was all definite deployed missions that we were addressed on.
What kind of resistance did you meet from the Germans? A lot of flak? Did they have a lot of artillery and anti-aircraft?
Yeah, we were, flak was our worst.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hit in the Po Valley.
Okay.
And I wound up with a Purple Heart and Distinguished Flying Cross. Because it was determined, the question was which medal would I receive, since was it while I was in the process of bombing, or was it en route, or was it after I dropped my bombs? And it was proven, they were so close, the medal I was given was the Distinguished Flying Cross. Anyway, I was wounded, and the pilot, we lost an engine, and they flew back on one engine. The pilot was administering me with my bleeding and so forth, and I claimed that maybe that's what made me like drugs. I became allergic to drugs from the shots he gave me.
Oh, really?
Oh no, I didn't really.
Yeah. Now, where were you hit on your person?
I was hit through the foot. It was hit the flak went from the back of my foot on up between my big toe and my next toe and came out. And I was also hit in the rear end, which is what's known as being struck in the ass. And but we came back safely on one engine, and I was then laid up for quite a while, and wound up with another pilot, and the wire was pretty close to the end by then, and we wound up strafing the enemy who were resisting on the coast between France and England. So our B-26s, which were medium bombers, became strafing planes. And that was the most fearful thing, I think, of the whole thing. But I remained over until the war was over.
Talk a little bit about, I've always been interested in this, when you come up on a target and the flak starts hitting, can you tell if the flak's exploding miles away before you actually fly into it?
You can't avoid it. Flak you can't avoid.
Mm-hmm.
What we would do, the navigator would take our complete group in near the target. From then on, our squadron command flight would take over their target, and we would be given, we would be taken within 5 minutes of the target, and from then on, we became the navigator, describing when it was time and so forth. And so during that time, you can't evade, you can't try to get out of flak. You've got your target sighted with a Norden bomb sight. You didn't necessarily aim at the target you wanted, but you picked out a target. And that is something that gave you something stable to bomb on. And then you released the bombs on the area that you wanted. That, of course, became some of the things that made mistakes. But our goals were to get 100% missions.
I'm sure that took a lot of nerve, a lot of steel nerves to keep on while this flak is going on around you, to keep on the target and not drop your load and get out of there as quickly as possible.
You don't even think about it, you just do it.
Okay.
Yeah, well, people think you lose your nerve and all. Actually, you don't lose your nerve. You're not thinking about after effects. You're thinking about hitting that target. And of course, I happened to be on one mission where the first jet plane that the Germans had entered in was coming at us in the Po Valley. And me with a bomb sight, I had no gun to even fire at him. He's coming at me from 1 o'clock, and all I could do is watch him and take a picture of him as he came in. And he hit the plane in back of us, and which went down. We lost that one. But in general, it wasn't as frightening as people think, because you're geared competitively.
Okay.
To do a job and to come out with the best result.
So do you think that Army training geared you to compete against the bombers next to you more so than thinking about?
Oh, no. You don't think about the plane next to you. That's the pilot's job.
In terms of like hitting your target, though, having a better hit rate.
That's my object. I have nothing more concerned. No distance, no flak. That's intelligence was to tell us where the flak guns supposedly were. So your original flight plan is to try to fly away from where the flak has been noticed before.
Okay.
So you had advanced notice where the flak guns were possibly heaviest. And then, of course, the pilots, the fighter planes that came in at you, you never knew how many there were or where they're coming from, because that would be, they were flying off of the highways and everything else, so you never knew where they were coming from.
Did you notice a decline in German fighters as the war went on, with their factories getting hit and their airfields getting hit? or did it seem like they were putting as many fighters up as they had always been putting up against you?
I don't know if I could have ever told that.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't my information. My information was the target, what we were achieving by hitting the target, and that was it.
When you dropped your load and you were still over the target site, this is always something I wondered about too. Were you then immediately out of the danger of the flak because the plane got lighter and you went up, or did you still have to navigate through it to get out of the target area? After
You just
dropped
have to
the
find
bombs?
your way clear to stay away from it as much as you could. Once you know where the guns are, your flights can't maneuver that easily.
Mhm.
You have to try, your lead plane is going to try to take you away from the flak. But you never know, it could be, we never knew who was shooting at you or where they were shooting from. Only what the intelligence could give you.
What kind of stuff did you do on your missions on the way to this target and on the way back? Was there a lot of talking between the crew, or did you just think about what was going to happen and keep quiet?
No, really, flying in medium bombers, where our flights were really not that long. I mean, it would be an hour to 2 hours of a flight.
Total for the whole mission?
Well, for the mission.
Okay.
And the heavy bombers, of course, had longer distances, and they flew much higher. We flew 14 to 18,000 feet, so we weren't really high.
And these were B-25s you were flying?
26s.
B-26, okay.
This is the Marauder,
Okay.
called a flying prostitute. It had no visible means of support.
Now that wasn't the plane that was one a day in Tampa Bay, the old saying they had about that.
Yeah,
That was the Marauder?
That was a Marauder, yeah.
How many on a crew on a B-26?
We had 6. There's usually a radio man, tail gunner, a pilot, co-pilot, a bombardier, and oftentimes a navigator would come along with us. But that was it.
So you went from Sardinia to Corsica, and when you were in Corsica, were you still flying to the Po Valley and hitting in Italy there?
All our targets were southern France,
Okay.
and along the Po, up into Austria, and we never really had targets in Germany itself.
Okay.
Mostly supply lines. It was Italy and Austria and France. Those were our basic targets.
After you got out of the hospital from when you got hit by the flak, what happened next? Did you get reassigned to another crew?
When I got out of the hospital, my crew had gotten in their number of missions, so I had to go to another pilot. And that's when I began flying lower level.
That's when you were strafing.
That's when I was strafing.
And did you basically do that through the end of the war? Was that your last?
Well, that was my last, yeah.
Where were you stationed then? Were you in France at that point?
We were in Dijon, France.
Dijon, France.
That was the last town that we flew out of.
And you were there for how long would you say?
Well, I was laid up for quite a while
Okay.
because of my wounds. They wouldn't heal.
Oh, okay.
And it so happened that a surgeon from Cincinnati was the first one to administer help for me. And all he wanted to do was talk about Cincinnati. And later on, he was cussed out by many other medical men because he didn't do a very good job of cleaning it. So I wound up living in stables as a hospital, and they wouldn't heal. And finally, I begged them to let me go to a hospital in France. Well, when I went up there, they wanted to know how long it had been since I'd been hit. And I told them, they said, "You're not leaving until we find out why." And then they found shoe leather along the bone that wouldn't allow it to heal. So once they took about 26 pictures, and only one of them showed this little shadow. And they found there was shoe leather and against the bone that was being infected that wouldn't let it heal. And a surgeon from Cleveland found what was wrong, and within days, I was healing.
Did anybody ever find out how you got shoe leather in your wound?
Well, it's the flak.
Oh, that's right. It was the foot.
The
Yeah,
flak,
okay.
yeah.
So the first surgeon from Cincinnati didn't catch it.
Well, he cleaned up what he saw, but he didn't get everything. And he, just one of those things, he wanted to talk more than he wanted to work, I think.
So then you healed up, and you went into Dijon. You were there when the war ended.
Yeah, well, when the war ended, yeah, we were in Dijon. And then we got, first we went over to Linz.
Okay, so you got transferred again
Yeah,
while the
from
war was still
Dijon,
going on.
we went over to Linz, and from Linz, that's when the war ended.
Do you remember the day that the war in Europe ended? How you found out the news? And
Well, I danced on the church grounds, and when the war was over, so we were still in France.
okay. Did you think at that time that you were going to be moved over to the Pacific Theater for the invasion of Japan?
Well, I think the only thing that kept me from having to go over to after the war was over, from going over to the Korean War, but it must have been my record of having the Purple Heart. I don't know, but several of my friends wound up going to Korea.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the war ended in Europe, and you were stationed then in Linz, Austria?
Linz.
And how long were you in
Linz was
Austria?
a very short time because the Russians wanted Linz,
Okay,
so we had to get out. The war was over then.
sure. Were you just waiting to
Waiting to
get
Europe.
back to the States?
Yeah.
And then after actually the Russians kind of forced you out, you had kind of a funny story about that. What the engineers in your
Well, our engineers were so clever at work. They took all the motors off all the boats along the water in Linz, and we took them up into the mountains and put them on boats in the lakes and the mountains. This was after the war was over.
okay,
So
they couldn't get their hands on
they couldn't get the
the motors.
No.
So then you were coming back to the States. Did you stop off at other posts in Europe, or did you kind of move straight back to coming back to the States?
Well, we wound up in the mountains of France after Linz, and it was pretty much happy alive. Very
Nobody's shooting at you anymore.
happy. Oh, yeah.
Did you get a chance to get into Paris while you were over there?
Oh yeah, I danced on the church grounds in Paris, a big church with the
Notre Dame?
Yeah, Notre Dame. Yeah,
And that was when you found out that the war was over, or that was
that's when the war in Europe was over.
okay?
Yeah.
And what was Paris like at that time? Was there a lot of damage from the German occupation and coming through, or did it look like it was in pretty
No,
good shape?
I don't think the Germans did too much damage to Paris. I think they enjoyed Paris too much. I really do. I don't think that had much to do with it.
So coming home, how did you get home? Did you take a ship or did you fly home?
Flew.
Okay. Now this is an interesting question that I've heard before, and I don't know if this is how it worked out for you. But did you fly as your crew flew one plane back over, or were you a passenger on a regular troop transport?
I was just a passenger then.
Okay.
Yeah, I lost. My crew was gone once we were out of Linz. There was no more crews. It was waiting your turn to go where you're going to be reclassified.
But you were still in the service when you got back.
Yeah.
That's okay. So where did you go? Where did you fly into in the States?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't even remember that.
And where did you go after you got back to the States? Where were you stationed?
Well, I was, just went for reclassification, that's all. Went back home.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, went home.
So that was it. And this was in 46, so the war in Japan had also ended. So it was all done at that time.
Yeah, then I went into school afterwards.
Yeah, we were talking earlier before we were on camera, but you were actually a student at Ohio State when the war broke out.
Right.
So did you go back to Ohio State after the
I went
war was
back
over?
and got my degree.
Using the GI Bill.
Yeah.
So did you have to pay for your first couple of years while you were over there? Year?
The
Okay.
the first couple was on my own.
Right.
I was going in my senior year before the war.
Oh, really? Okay. So you got your last year paid for at Ohio State. Then what did you do? What was the next thing that happened in your life?
Just came back and got the degree and decided what I wanted to do, and that's all.
Now, were you married when you were in the service?
No.
Okay, so you met your wife after
Yeah.
after the war was over, and moved back here to Cincinnati. And did you go into business or?
Yeah, I was in the florist business for 55 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Are there any other stories that you can think of from your war
Nothing I
days?
could put out for publication.
Well, Mr. Lessure, we really appreciate you sitting down and talking with us.
Well, good. It's just we don't have the excitement to tell because our excitement was finding the target, watching for planes, and explaining to the gunner. We only had one gunner. That was on the rear of the plane. And it was really interesting. Our flights were not that long. So it was only a couple hours of flying time. But it's nerve-wracking. At one time, I took a place, I volunteered to take another bombardier's job. And everybody told me that I was stupid to do this. You don't volunteer. And so in order to protect myself, I went around to the different planes that weren't going to be used the next day and took the flak suits out and put them underneath me in the plane that I was going to fly in. And when I got back, there was an 8-inch hole in the bottom.
Oh, really?
Underneath me.
So your plane actually got hit by flak.
Oh, that was a different plane.
But all of the flak suits
the
that you
hole
had
was
piled
that
up.
big, yeah.
Now, what was a flak suit like? What was that made out of? Do you remember?
Well, the flak suit is like armor.
Okay.
It's looser, but it's armor that takes anything that hits. It's going to have to go through to several layers, and it worked.
Did you ever get hit besides the time you got hit in
that
the
was
foot?
the only time.
Okay, so you never got hit in the flak suit and it protected you besides the
Well, that's it.
the piled
that
up
was a
flak
different
suits.
one. That was not where I was hit. That was another
Right.
plane. So
It's pretty interesting.
I was in a plane that was hit twice, 2 different times.
Did anybody else in your crew on different missions get hit in the plane that you were in?
Well, I didn't know it until after the war was over that 2 other people in my plane were hit.
The same time you were hit or at
Yeah,
different
same
times?
time.
Oh, really?
I didn't know that. And evidently it wasn't that major. But mine was where I had to have morphine shot.
Did you get to save the piece of flak that went into you, or did it come out of you?
I'm not a saver.
Okay. Because I have seen people come in here before with pieces of flak that had come through and hit them.
No, I never believed in that. I'm not one of those people that saves everything. But
Did you ever have to bail out in overseas?
no,
Did you ever have to bail out in training?
no. Thank goodness.
They didn't have us just to go through the process? You never bailed?
You didn't drive. You were told how
Okay.
to pull this cord and what to do, but no, we never had to drop out of the plane. No.
Well, can you think of anything else you'd like to
No,
talk about?
I think we're pretty well covered. I had as exciting a time in the States as I did out of the States.
One question that I did have that came up while we were talking earlier, when you dropped your bombs, could you then see whether or not they hit the target, or did you have to rely on the photographs?
You had to wait till you went back, and you usually learned it a few hours afterwards. Most of the time, you never even knew.
Okay.
Right? But if you were interested enough, you did. All we really cared was flying and getting back. It wasn't a case of measuring what you did.
Right.
But
you said that they would take photographs of this.
well, they wanted to know what effect our bombs did, and then they would show maps. This squadron hit this target. This squadron hit this target. This squadron hit this target. So it wasn't every plane hitting the same target.
Where were the cameras attached on the airplane?
I don't know which one. It probably was tail. It's probably the tail end. I don't know. I have no idea where they were. Never on any ship I was on.
Okay, so they were only one
On one of the flights.
plane out of the whole squadron was
Yeah.
taking pictures. I got you.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Well, again, I thank you very much for taking the time to come and
Well,
talk with us. And
I don't have an exciting story to tell.
I think they're
some of
great
these
stories.
others.
I think they're great stories, and you know, every one of these we learn a little bit more about the war and about what went into fighting the war. So, I thank you, Mr. Lessure, for
Thank you
coming
for
down.